All right, here we go. Hey, Randy, episode
Hey,
6.
hey, Carl, good to see you.
They just keep rolling off 6 in a row. We thought 3 was a podcast. 6 means something. So
I guess so. It may
good
mean that
stuff.
we've got nothing better to do with our time, but that's okay too.
There is that. I look forward to it every week. Got feedback at a dinner the other night that we agree a lot. So I don't know, the name change. We could open it up for suggestions for name changes if we never end up arguing over. By the 100th episode, if we hadn't had an argument, we're going to have to rethink the 85-15. So I think the challenge is we're going to have to some way we're going to have to get feedback and read it on air. I think maybe you and I don't get mad at each other, but I think you and I agree on this one. We might frustrate some people, so that'll be good. So episode 6, the CFP means nothing until conference play means something. Have we sacrificed the conference on the altar of the national championship? So there's a lot in there, a long title, but we're going to talk through conference realignment and then changes to the CFP. Are they needed or not? And I've got just a little thought to kick us off. And you and I both talked about something that we heard on Josh Pate. He was talking about Augusta National, and somebody asked the question, there are things to be learned from the way Augusta does things with their tradition and history. And, you can't run, no phones, all the things they've got at Augusta, which are pretty cool. Um, and I think he's right. Josh leans toward the tradition, history. He doesn't like all the new stuff. He doesn't like conference realignment. He doesn't like the CFP even. So he's not a fan of new things. I think the challenge is, and you look back at that, it's kind of like I enjoyed naps when I was in first grade. They didn't seem good. I think they would be good now. But you look back at things, high school was great. I don't really want to go back. Um, and I think that's unfortunate. The nostalgia view of things, I think, can complicate it. Of everything was better when, fill in the blank, 10 years ago, whatever it was. I think that's causing some of the fundamental problems. But it no doubt has changed. I think we can all agree it's changed college football between the realignment and the CFP. It's not the same. It was a more regional sport. You had kind of regional grudge matches and rivalries, some that have been upset, some of them that have been renewed. So it's definitely changed that. So in lieu of some of those things, we've ended up with a kind of a bracket and a playoff system that still people don't like. When it was 4, people wanted their 5th team to be in. Now that it's 12, the 13th team's mad that they're not in. So it seems to be a moving target. And the question I'll ask to kick us off, and I'll kick it over to you, is same thing I asked last week for the transfer portal and NIL is, if we had nothing and we started from scratch, would we be where we are?
Good
I
question.
think my answer
Yeah.
would be no. I think the problem is we are trying to mix nostalgia and a new system, and we're stuck in the middle. We're trying to preserve some histories and some sacred cows that people like, while also progressing. And I think here in the middle is where we lie. It's a weird system that is kind of the worst of a lot of things, and trying to preserve the best. So, to answer that question, if we started from nothing, what would it look like? I think you and I both have got some suggestions on how to fix it all. If only we could get somebody to listen to us. And I think a simple answer to the question of the whole title of the thing is, has the CFP, kind of caused conference championships to mean nothing? Well, I was at the national championship last year, and if I remember correctly, Carson Beck took a snap as time ran down on the 50-yard line, down 6, with a chance to win the national championship. But Miami didn't even play for their conference championship. So I think that the answer's got to be no based on that. So anyway, over to you.
All right. Well, I first of all shout out to Josh Pate because, as you mentioned last week, he looks at things from a fan's perspective more than from a conference administration or revenue generation or media rights and that sort of thing. And I appreciate him for that very reason. Much of what I am going to suggest tonight, well, some of it anyway came from him, so it's not original. So once again, kudos to him. anybody out there, if you're a college football fan and you're not following Josh Pate, you need to do so.
Yep.
You may not always agree, but one thing I can say for him is that he's looking out for the fan at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And I really appreciate that. So I'm old, as I've pointed out many, many times, and I remember those. I look back with nostalgia upon those days when the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, they really meant something. It doesn't mean that finding a national champion was any easier or any better back then. In fact, I remember before you were born, 1969, University of Texas was number 1 in the country. Arkansas was number 2. They're both in the Southwest Conference. They're playing the last game of the season, conference game of the season in Fayetteville. Richard Nixon is there. And it was determined he would present what was called the President's Trophy, designating the national champion at the conclusion of that game. Texas was down 14-0 in the fourth quarter, came back and won 15-14. They had entered number 1. Arkansas was number 2. And there was a big halftime presentation with President Nixon, and Texas was dubbed the national champion, regardless of the fact that they had a Cotton Bowl game still to play against Notre Dame. But and there have been numerous times on into the 2000s, prior to the BCS anyway, maybe the late 1990s, where we've had 2 champions, where we had an AP champion and Coaches Bowl champion.
Yep.
I happened to be in Nebraska rooting for the Cornhuskers when they and Michigan ended up sharing a national championship.
And if you go further back, even probably early in your time, before your time, I think of Alabama's 130 national championships they claim. There were some Reader's Digest, Farmer's Almanac. I think there were some years where there were like 5 national championships. I know Auburn just got another one last year during the middle of the season. They claimed another one. So they harken back to the days of every publication seemed to have a national champion. So it wasn't hard to get a national championship. It was hard to figure out who the national champion was. So.
Right.
And there's never been a trophy given out. I think this is funny. Of all the claimed national championships, the one sport that never gives out that silly little wooden and metal trophy is Division I FBS. College football has never had one of those. So
right. Well, it's interesting that with the starting probably with the BCS and certainly getting into the CFP, there's been such a premium placed on which conference you're in. I mean, that helps you get into the playoff. That helps you to get a higher ranking, better seeding. And so everybody wants to get into the SEC. Everybody wants to get into the Big Ten or the Big 1G or whatever the heck it is they call themselves these days. All of a sudden, we've got 16 teams, 18 teams. Everybody wants to get into one of the Power 4, this sort of thing. And I think that also, there's a motivation there because the way things are going right now, maybe it's changed recently, but, if you were the 5th best team in the SEC, you were out there banging on the door to get into the playoffs because we all know that the SEC was so much harder than any other conference, yada, yada, yada. None of that makes sense. I think a lot of that is assumption. A lot of that is based on certainly on recency bias, media bias, this sort of thing.
It's a beauty contest. It's like figure skating and beauty contests.
So I've come up with some suggestions that I want to pull up here. The first, starting with conference realignment. And this is going to upset a lot of people because I have it's more based on history. The things that I looked at when I was trying to put together and said, if I was building this from scratch, I would take into consideration geographic proximity, sort of historic rivalries, and even history going back to, were you a part of the original charter of a particular conference? Not that always won the day. And there's a method to my madness. What I would like for you to do is you're going to be the expert and you're going to shoot holes in this, why it won't work, not why it wouldn't be accepted, because the truth is change in NC2A football is very slow coming about anyway. Probably none of this is going to be accepted, but for me, it seems to make a little bit of sense. I'm going to try to share this with us. Let's see if we can read it.
So while you do that, I'm gonna give us a little history lesson of kind of where we were and where we are. So you got the geographic logic and associated rivalries have been torn up. The conferences have kind of been bastardized for TV revenue. The SEC is no longer SE. The Big Ten stretches from coast to coast with 18 teams. The Pac-12's gone. The Big 12 is 16 teams, and the ACC has 18 teams, and they're on the Pacific and the Atlantic. So it's kind of a journey of the last few years of where we were and where we.
No, absolutely, and it's I don't know if this is going to work, only because I don't think it's going to be able to show the full page on this.
Yeah, I see the top of it there for sure.
Yeah, I can see the top of it, but I can't seem to get this thing to move. Let me take a look right quick and see if it will. If it doesn't, we'll read it. This one may look a little better. I'm not sure. Somewhat, but not really. It's still going to show it small. So that's okay.
The good news is I see you've got a solution, I've got a solution, and they're significantly different. So
okay, well, that's
we're gonna get to the 15 tonight.
All right. Well, okay. First of all, let me just go through mine real quick. Yep. And just I see us coming up with 6 conferences. Okay, in terms of major conferences. I'm not going to call them the Power 6 or anything else. Just 6 conferences, and many of them are throwbacks. Let's go start with the Big Ten. Pretty much the same cast of characters to a large extent, with a couple of exceptions. Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota. Notice I have inserted Notre Dame. The way I would look at the national championship is you do not get into the CFP if you're not in conference, period. I don't care if you are Notre Dame. No independents will be getting in. You can be independent all you want to, and you can go play whatever schedule you want, but you won't be in the CFP.
Did you run this by
then
Braden?
Ohio State, Penn State, Purdue, and Wisconsin.
Did you run that by Braden to make sure he was good with it before you presented?
No, I've got a feeling that when he sees this, I'm going to be hearing from him. I'm certain
good.
That I will.
I like it.
But
that's awesome.
The other thing that you will notice is that every one of these conferences is restricted to 10 conference members, and there is a reason for that when we get into the CFP and the schedule. SEC, once again, very much the same cast of characters. Now, the SEC, I didn't know until I went back and did a little history. There were 13 original members. Well, that means somebody's going to get left out. Some of them already have moved on to other conferences. But the big change here is the exclusion of Kentucky. If I'm going to get to 10 teams, I was kind of stuck between, is it Vanderbilt or is it Kentucky? They were both charter members of the SEC when they all left the Southern Conference back at the turn of the 20th century. Right now, I just think that Vanderbilt has earned that. I think their program, at least right now, is in better shape than Kentucky's. Now, will that continue with new quarterbacks and that sort of thing? I don't know. I am resurrecting the old Southwest Conference, moving because Texas and A&M and Oklahoma and Missouri never belonged in the SEC. Missouri probably had the best argument there, but this is back to what was much of the original Southwest Conference: Arkansas, Baylor, Houston, Missouri. Yes, we're going to add food to the conference. We got Rice in there, SMU, TCU, Texas, A&M, and Texas Tech. There is a proximity there, especially the Final Three, but all of those teams, they recruit heavily. Texas and Oklahoma in that area.
Well, 8 of them are in Texas, so.
What's that?
8 of them are in Texas, right?
Yes.
Is that right? Am I
yes.
counting? Yeah. All except for Arkansas, Missouri.
Going back to the Pac-10, a lot of this, again, makes sense because some of it is based in history. A lot of it is just locale. Do have Arizona State, BYU and Utah in there simply because those programs, Arizona, Arizona State, BYU, and Utah, have established themselves to a level and a competitive level that I don't think you stick them in the Mountain West or whatever other conference gets left out there. Then you've got, of course, Cal, Oregon, Stanford, UCLA, USC, Washington. Notice that I have pulled Oregon, the two states, Oregon State, Washington State. It does not mean that that Washington State Apple Cup is going to go away. It just becomes a non-conference rivalry, just like Texas and Oklahoma, because you can see that I've moved Oklahoma out of the Southwest Conference, even though they were a charter member. I've moved them elsewhere. So those are the 10 that would make up the Pac-10. The Big Eight now is, and there used to be a Big Eight, and yes, there's 10 teams, so you can change the names of the conferences. It doesn't matter. A lot of these are, long-standing Big Eight. They go back to the Big Eight: Colorado, Iowa, Iowa State, Kansas, Kansas State, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State. The one place where I kind of got away from the geographic location was I stuck Pitt and West Virginia into this particular conference. It's not that far away. You got a tremendous, regardless of the records of those two teams, that's a great rivalry every year, just like Cal and Stanford. Cal and Stanford may not have good teams, but that's a long-standing, important rivalry. So that's my Big 8-10. Then I go to the ACC, pretty much the same characters once again. Again, only 10 teams. Clemson, Duke, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Miami, North Carolina State, Virginia, Virginia Tech, and Wake. Once again, that preserves a lot of in-state rivalries, cross-state line rivalries, that sort of thing. And they're all still pretty much in the same geographic region. We're going to save a whole lot on travel with this particular scenario. Now, granted, that only places 60 teams in the conferences. And that means a whole lot of the 134 teams that are in college football have been left out. It doesn't mean they can't have their conferences. You'll see when we get to my recommendation on how to handle the CFP, there's still a pathway in, with one exception. You have to be in a conference. Sorry, Notre Dame, got to do it. Now, within the conferences, as I've got them recommended, every team must play every other team in their conference. Now we don't have any outside entities saying, well, Texas Tech had a weaker schedule this year than Baylor did, that sort of thing. Everybody's going to play the same schedule. That allows us to use the one-loss record. What happens on the field has got to be important. It also makes the conference championship that much more important, the regular season championship. So you're going to have 9 games in conference if you've got 10 teams in your conference. That gives you 3 games for outside of conference. You don't need any more than that. So if you want to play the Little Sisters of the Blind, fine, you can do that, but you only get 3 non-conference games. And for some of them, like Texas and Oklahoma, Red River Shootout is going to be one of them. So there's one of your non-conference games right there. So then each team, of course, would receive one bye, not 2, but 1 bye. There wouldn't be a conference championship game. There would be a regular season champion. If you end up with ties, the conference can have its tiebreakers. Everybody will understand what that is, and as long as they follow that, we may not agree with the tie-breaking system, but then I think that should be left up to the conferences to make that determination. Each of these 6 conferences would receive 2 bids to the CFP. Sorry, Big Ten. Sorry, SEC. You don't get your automatic 3 or 4 or 5 or 9 that you would like to have. Okay, you get 2. Now, this I stole directly from Josh Pate. I thought it was a brilliant idea. I don't know if he stole it from somebody else, but his recommendation was that the second and third place teams in these conferences had a play-in game.
Yeah.
And those play-in games can be played under the auspices of the Orange Bowl, the Sugar Bowl. I mean, they're important. because whoever wins that game between the second and third place teams also gets into the CFP. So that's how you arrive at the regular season champion. And this gives you a real motivation to win your regular season. If you're the regular season champion, you don't have to play. You get a bye, an extra bye now during that week that they're having the play-in game. Also, you'll see that I believe that when you start seeding the CFP, the 6 conference champions take the top 6 spots. And we'll get to that in a minute.
So one thing to clarify, Randy, I'm
Sure.
sure I don't remember perfectly, but in Josh Pate's model, I think there still were conference championships. He had the conference championship, and then on the same weekend, the next 2 teams would play. So 1 and 2 are playing the conference championship, and then like 3 and 4 were playing. And you're not guaranteed anything, but those are audition games to be taken into consideration. So yours is a little modified of his, but
that was going to allow 3. But if you do it that way, then the question becomes, what is my motivation if I'm in that conference championship? Are we both going to go?
Yeah.
Or does the loser then have to go down and play the third place team?
Right.
And that means I got to play an extra game in order to get in. So if 1 and 2 are automatically getting in, and then 3 and 4 are playing for that third position, if I don't care whether I win the championship, the conference championship or not, I'm in. Maybe I sit my starters, and if I get beat 56-0, who cares? I'm number 2 and I get in. So that's the problem that I have with that. I also think that if you're going to go with 6 conferences, it might make sense if you go in Power 4. But since I have more conferences and I don't want to load up and have a 62-team college football playoff, I determined I would rather have 2 champions or 2 bids be offered that are automatic. And I just made a suggestion there that the Big Ten could do their play-in through the Sugar Bowl, the SEC could use the Peach Bowl, Southwest Conference could use the Cotton Bowl, the Pac-12, the Fiesta, the Big 8, the Liberty, and the ACC, the Orange. You could do whatever you want. Those happen to be kind of the bowls that have been the most prominent in the last couple of decades. So that's how I would handle the conference realignment. And let's stop there. And then I'll get into the CFP rules because this plays into it. But what are the issues that I think we know what a lot of the arguments are going to be. The SEC is going to say our top 8 teams are better than anybody in the Big 12. You know what? Win your games, win your conference. Okay. Because who says you're better? You say, well, we play a tougher schedule. Who says it's tougher? The SEC. Who says that? And you can take some recency bias and say, well, who's won the last 10 national championships? Well, it's mainly been Alabama and Georgia and Michigan and Ohio State. I might buy that those are 4 of the best teams in the country, but that does not make their conferences the strongest conferences in the country.
It depends on
what
we've talked about.
Could be made, and that making your way through the Big 12 over the last few years has been more difficult than making your way through the SEC. I think there's a lot more parity now. That may not be
last
true
year.
Now. And probably not moving forward. But,
well, here's the thing too. Is here's part of the problem with what is defined as the best conference or the hardest conference. The best conference, if it's national championships, clearly the last 3 years it's the Big Ten. But their top is really good. Their bottom is terrible, and it's evidenced by data. Go look at the spreads every week and the results of their games when the top plays the bottom. 21 point, 28 point spreads. The SEC, and part of it, go look at how many players are being put in the league from teams throughout the whole conference. So the top of the SEC, I would argue, the SEC is basically the Big 12 now. Top to bottom, very close. Top not as good as Big 10 top. But the parity, you're seeing 7 to 10 point lines when you have the number 1 SEC team versus the number 9 SEC team.
Right.
So again, what's best? We can make an argument. Which one's harder to play in? Man, I don't care how good your top 2 teams are, but if every game is a 7 to 10 point spread and every team's got 4 players they're putting in the league, That's a harder schedule.
That's a
So by the
pretty
time you
schedule.
get to week 11, you're beat up. So
Right.
talking about best conference, and that's what people try to do, and they have that argument. It's a silly argument because what is
Right.
that? What's your
And then
criteria?
and when you start using that argument, now I have a reason to put the top 5 teams, the top six
Right.
teams
Yep.
from the SEC into the CFP, and the top 4 teams from the Big Ten
Yep.
into the CFP. And now there's no room for anybody else. And again, it's still speculation.
Yeah,
It may
I agree.
be accurate speculation, but let's win the games. You want something to be important? Win your conference regular season, which means win more games in conference than any of your competitors in your conference win.
So
And then,
let me give you some of my feedback on what you said, and then I'm going to give you a counter that's
okay,
dramatically different in some ways and maybe not in other ways. You focused on which teams were in which conference. I didn't look as much at that as I did kind of a conference structure. So I think the challenge with yours is it's what I said earlier. It is a nostalgic look at how do we go back to where we are and solve the problem going forward. And I think that's challenging because the game has moved. It's in a different spot. They're looking at TV revenue. You've got these mega conferences, so to go break them apart, I think that's challenging. Not anything's possible.
and by the way, we'll cover that next week because I've already decided we're going to talk about how to equitably fund college athletics next week,
Okay, I
and
like
that may
that.
solve a lot of this
Well, I think one
of your concerns.
I think a positive with the way you've set the teams up is you can keep baseball and basketball and football and the non-revenue producing sports together. My proposal is more than likely not going to do that. It's probably going to have to break football apart and do it differently than everything else, and I think that's a challenge. But what I tried to do is you looked back, and I do think there's nostalgia, and I like some of that and some of the regular season games. I also like where we are. I think the playoffs good. I think there's excitement in that. I don't think the regular season means any less. I don't not watch regular season games because I'm like, well, it's not going to matter. They're going to get in the playoffs. That's not how I. And I know that's part of Josh Pate's worry. I like listening to he and Clatt. It's kind of like one likes it how it was, one likes it how it is, and I feel a little bit about both. I like some of the nostalgia, but I also know we can't necessarily go back to second grade and take naps after lunch. So I think yours preserves a lot of things. The way the structure of college athletics is, I think that's good. I think it still leaves a lot of interpretation open. So I tried to channel a guy that you gave me his book, and we both love him. I tried to look at what would Mike Leach do if he were still alive and if he were made commissioner of college football for a while. For those of anybody who hasn't seen it, go watch his rant. It's up there with the Halloween candy rant, but the rant on
Right.
college football and how FBS doesn't have a playoff, and he starts all the way with Pee Wee and works his way all the way through every level of football that has a playoff except for FBS college football. So I looked at that and said, okay, how do we and we talked about this a little bit last week, leveraging the most popular sport in the United States, the NFL, which college football is most like now. How do we learn from what they've done? So I looked at a structure and said, okay, we're close on teams. You built it from the bottom up. I said, let's take 64 teams. And there's method to why I said that. 64 teams in a top division. We can call it FBS for whatever we want to call it. Then, to your point earlier, do an FCS division because 64, what happens to the other balance of the 134? Do an FCS, a sub-tier, whatever you want to call it. I think they get built just the same way that FBS does with conferences. I didn't try to solve that problem, but build them with conferences, do a playoff, mirror what you're doing with FBS. And I think that sets itself up, and I think you and I mentioned this on a previous one before, even for relegation. So if you want to say, hey, what if Tulane or James Madison or one of these teams had a really outstanding season? Well, if you win the FCS, then maybe you can go up. And maybe if you're Vanderbilt and you suck every year, you go play FCS. So I think there's even a way to make that fun, that there's a bigger prize for winning the FCS, that you might get to play with the big boys for a couple of years. So that could be fun.
I like that. I like that idea because you can find a team. You wouldn't wish it on anyone, but if Rice for 8 consecutive years finishes, 1-8 in the Southwest Conference, How do you keep Tulane out, who's also in the
Right.
same geographic region?
Well, and
So
when you look at money, because Rice in this in your structure and mine, the conference money is going to be bigger with these FBS schools. So what's to say that a Tulane, if they were given the opportunity to go compete and get more money with revenue sharing, that they couldn't compete up there? And I
right.
think it's
No,
fun. It makes it
yeah,
so.
relegation, you'll get a lot of pushback on that.
Oh, I know, and it is part of the fundamental piece where you have to break football away from everything else because relegating all the sports is weird. So I'm that is a kind of a nice to have. So if that's what killed it, because you would have to break the sports apart, I would be willing to give up relegation. So here's
Okay.
what I decided. Let's call it the Civil War because I think that's fun. And let's kind of go north and south. Let's go the two biggest conferences right now. Everybody who wouldn't agree, I would have a hard time with their argument that the SEC and the Big Ten are the two best right now, depending on whatever metrics you've got. So let's just say we're going to split all 64 teams into the Big Ten and the SEC, and we'll rename them eventually. But for figuring's sake, let's do that.
So
And
that's the
then
AFC and NFC.
we're headed down that path, yes. And then
Okay.
within that, you're going to have an SEC South conference. The Big Ten is the North Conference, and then break it into East and West. So that starts doing even some of what you were talking about, where you get the realigned geographic nature. You start helping the travel problems where the ACC doesn't have Pacific Coast teams in it. And it does help some of those rivalries. So again, I didn't spend the time putting the teams in there. I think you could take what you've done and fit that logically into a North Conference, South Conference, and then East and West divisions of both of those. So again, I think you've got 16 or 6 conferences. I'm just saying have 2. But what I'm ultimately leading to is taking all rankings away when we get to the playoff, and I even built a regular season model, and it takes out all the ambiguity. Mike Leach would love it. So it leaves, there's no rankings or guessing or who's better. It's strictly an NFL playoff type model.
I think you and I were looking at the same teams. I ended up with 60, and I did take 4 out that are long-standing members of Division One. Right. So, the 64 makes sense. It doesn't work well in my model when I get to the CFP playoff. That's the only reason I cut it down.
Yep. No, and again, I think the spirit of both of what we're doing, I think where we're going to start having some differences once you get to the playoffs. But with the conferences, I think we both agree on geographic realignment. Cuts down on travel, reignites some of the rivalries, all that. How you do that, again, if we could move more toward that, I think it would be better, because I don't know of many people that think it's awesome that you've got ACC teams that are in the Northwest or Cal or whatever. I mean, I couldn't even remember who was in the ACC. When I look and see Cal in the ACC, that makes no sense. Cal and Stanford being in the ACC makes no sense. So that's kind of, again, I think we're not far off on the conference. I think when we get to the playoffs, it's
UCLA and USC being in the Big Ten doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. So. And the SEC is not. It's more of an SC because there's Southwestern teams that are in there now. So.
Well, how are you going to move then in that big model, that 64? Would you have 4? But would it be a lot like of course, the NFL's got 3 divisions. You got an East, West, and Central in each. Yeah. Is that kind of what your model?
I stuck it with 2. I'm leaving just the East and West. And again, you could continue to refine and break down. I didn't spend that much time. I just strictly said.
But that's an East and West in the North and an East and West in the South.
Yep. So you got 2 conferences, and there's 2 divisions in each conference.
Okay.
And you've got 32 teams. You got 32 teams in each conference, and you got 16 teams in each division. So you could call that 4 conferences. Again, semantics of what it is. You could call it 4 conferences or 2 conferences and 2 divisions, whatever. But I'm basically dividing the nation into 4 quadrants. But with the regular season games, when we'll play it out, you'll see what I'm doing with the divisions and all that.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, it could be conferences too.
At least the Kansas City Chiefs know they're going to play everybody in the AFC West. I don't see that happening in your model.
So here, before we get into, and it doesn't happen now. There's rotations and all that.
No, you're right. Absolutely, it doesn't.
So here's where, before I get into the playoffs and everything, is so 4 12 regular season games is 7 division games, 3 games against teams from the other division in your conference, and then 2 cross-conference games, which would leave some of those rivalries if you did have a Texas, Oklahoma, wherever they ended up. You
Right.
could preserve some of those. Notre Dame's rivalry with USC could be preserved in that model. So 7 division games, 3 against the other division, and then 2 that are out of conference. And then you get out of the little sisters of poor. Now, that's part of the reason I like this, because I'm completely doing away. There are no more rankings in my world. Rankings are
Yeah,
done. Rankings we're going
you
to
know,
have for preseason so we can banter about it. But at the end of
yeah,
the day, they're not going to
my
matter.
comment was much like that too, in that I don't want any human being making a decision as to who
Yep.
gets into the CFP. It
That's
needs to be done on the
yep.
field. I have no problem with rankings if the betting platforms want
Yeah.
to use those to increase their revenue. Fine, I don't
It's
gamble
fun
online, so they can
off-season
do that.
banner, and it gives us something to talk about during the spring
Right,
and
but
summer.
it
But
shouldn't. But it should have no bearing at all on the CFP,
that's what I
in
tried
my
to get
opinion.
out.
Yeah.
Well, and so that schedule too is it does give you, it takes out, again, you're not going to be playing FCS teams in this model. You're
Right.
more like the
Right.
NFL. If you're playing 64, those 64 are playing each other. So you don't have the
Right.
freedom to go play 3 other games. So that's how you're
Right.
playing more games in your conference and division,
Okay.
is you're only playing your conference and division and then the 2 cross conference. So that does give you heavy focus on your division, meaningful conference identity geographically. And then you do get some national crossover with those 2 games. So, because of what I also don't want to lose, and I think we're in danger of this right now, Sark is honoring the Ohio State and the Michigan games, but that might be it. We may stop
Right.
seeing, and Texas got punished last year for going to play Ohio State. Yes, they could have beat Florida, they could have beat Georgia. But if they don't have that 3rd loss, they're in the playoffs. And if they play anybody else like most people did in week 1, they would have. And I want to see them play Ohio State. I'm excited about them playing them this year. I love those week 1 and 2
You don't want them.
games.
You don't want them playing William and Mary and Temple.
Ironically, Texas has never played an FCS school. They're one of the few schools in the nation they've never scheduled an FCS school, and I like it. Again,
Right.
it depends on what you want. If you want your team to
Right.
be in the playoffs every year, then do it. Do more of it. And if that's and that is where I think, and there's been a lot of discussion from Greg Sankey and Sark's talked about it and other coaches, and Lane Kiffin was talking about it recently. Why would you schedule those strong out of
Yeah.
conference
But,
games right
well,
now?
what you do is you change how you get in the playoffs, which is what you and I are both talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
But
You
under the
don't
current
get.
model, there's no incentive for
No,
playing a
absolutely
top
not.
team out of conference.
Absolutely not. But
You get punished.
that's the biggest fly in the ointment in the current situation. The media has no business selecting who goes into the CFP.
Right.
Sorry, guys. I know you do it for a living, and I don't. And you're much better at your analysis than I am. That's beside the point. Win the games on the field. Win the games in your conference, in your division, or get left out. I don't care who you are, and I
But it
don't care
fixes
what
too, and
conference you're in.
not having those 3 games to schedule whoever you want to makes it where everybody's going to be scheduling somebody like an Ohio State. Now, it's probably going to make Vandy more popular. Everybody's going to play them. Everybody's going to play a few of these schools. But you can preserve those fun out of conference games that we have now, and you're not going to get penalized about them the same way because everybody's going to have to do that.
Right.
So
No,
that's kind of my.
I think we're heading the
close.
same direction. Well, we have the same goal. Getting there, we're a little bit different in that regard.
I think I took
Let's
a more
talk.
NFL look forward view, and you're looking
Yeah.
more at how do we go back where we were view.
Yeah, I mean, and mainly because I'm old enough to remember how cool that was. And the reality is, I still think you could end up, and we'll talk again. Now we'll get into the CFP and how you get in and that sort of thing. I still think you could end up with very, very good teams in the playoffs, even if
absolutely.
you had 6 conferences. But moving into the CFP, I laid out some guidelines. If I could talk Josh Pate into becoming the commissioner of football, and then if I could have his ear, this is what I would recommend. Number 1, you have to be in a conference in order to participate in the CFP. No independents. Sorry. In addition to under my scenario, you would have 12 out of the conferences that were automatic, the first and second place teams. Okay. Or the first team, the one that won the regular season, and the one that won the playoff or the play-in between the second and third place teams. So you got 12 there. The CFP committee would have only 2 functions. And the first one is a little bit subjective. They would select 4 at-large teams from any conference. No SEC, you don't get to say, well, we get 2 of those and the Big Ten gets 2 of them. No, they will use their acumen, use their experience, and pick the 4 best teams, those that are deemed worthy of getting in. So now we're at a 16-team playoff. There are no byes. Okay. Again, to place an emphasis on winning your regular season conference championship, the 6 conference champions would be seeded 1 through 6. Now, the order of that would still be done by the CFP committee. Okay, so the Big Ten champion might be number 1, and the SEC champion might be number 2, but then it wouldn't be the Big Ten play-in that would be number 3. The champions would be the first 6. Okay, and the CFP committee would seed the first 16, and it would be a typical 1 would play 16, 2 would play 15, 3 would play 14, etc. for the first round. Then we would reseed with every successive round. That would be done by the committee. I mean, they're still important. Okay. So we would reseed, so that we would have 8 teams then that made it into the second round. One of them might have been the 16th ranked team, 16th seeded team in the first round that pulled an upset. Once again, the committee would seed that. When we go from those 8 teams to 4, the committee would seed those 4, and then you'd have the national championship game. I would say that when these are seeded, the highest seeded team for every pairing, that game would be in their home stadium. These are not going to be spread all over the U.S. In fact, every round, the way I would do it, every round except the national championship, the higher seeded team would host that in their home stadium. No, Georgia would not host that in the Dome in Atlanta. They would do it between the hedges, and because this is important for the universities, this is important for their student body, for their alumni, etc. There would be no byes under this scenario, and all rounds would be played consecutive. There would be no gaps between the play-in games would be on one weekend, and the following weekend you would start this. So no gaps. The national championship, and again, I've stolen this from both Klatt and from Josh Pate, would always be in the Rose Bowl.
I got to
Sorry
talk about that in a minute too. I'll talk to you about that. It would
always be in the Rose Bowl.
It's the worst place to watch a football game ever. I'll talk about
it. It is. And even when the weather's lousy, which isn't often.
It's a bad stadium.
It's still the place to be. So the sole purpose of the CFP committee would be to select the 4 at large and to do the seeding all the way up to the national championship game. And I've just got here that national rankings by media sources, while they create some interest during the season, which is a good thing, should have no bearing whatsoever on the selection of these teams. And so we'll stop there, and then I want to talk about how this would work into a schedule here, because I think that's important, and it relates to our discussion last week about especially the portal. So in terms of getting into the CFP, where am I wrong? Where am I going to run into a lot of pushback?
Well, I think yours is going to get less pushback than mine, but my friend Mike Leach and I think yours is not good because you still got a bunch of people
I know. This is one
seating
of the few areas,
the committee, and
this is one of the few areas where Mike and I disagree. Mike said that the NC2A basketball should be 128 teams.
Yeah.
And he said that football should be 64, and he could show you on a calendar
I know
how you can pull it off.
So here's the thing, and I don't agree that it should be a March Madness style bracket. Here's what's funny is you went backwards looking nostalgically at the conferences. I'm going to do more of that with the playoff. And I even brought the Rose Bowl into consideration. I threw it out because, again, I've watched the game there and it sucks. It's cool. It's like going to a drive-in movie. It seems good. It's nostalgic. I'd rather go to a really nice movie theater to watch a good movie.
Yeah. See, that's the problem I have with the Cotton Bowl being played at Jerry World.
No, I don't disagree, but it depends on what you're looking at. So if we could get it down to where the national championships played, that would be good. I do agree that playing all of the playoff games should be at stadiums. It's brutal on fans. It's brutal on the schools. It's brutal on everybody with this silliness. You look at some of these schools like Oregon and where they had to play and where they had to go, it's insanity. And nobody's thinking about that. They're not selling tickets. These places are not selling out because they can't. The fans pick one or two games. They can't do all of them. Well, if they're at their home stadium.
Imagine what it cost Oregon to get their cheerleaders, to get their band, ridiculous. Their dance team, everything transported. It was bad enough going from Lubbock to Miami.
So here's where Pate may like my model better because I'm basically going back to a four-team playoff model. No humans making seeding, no nothing. So after you play the regular season the way I did, you've got clear cut at the end of that. You've got division champions. So you've got an SEC East champion, SEC West champion, Big Ten East, Big Ten West. That becomes pretty clear. If you need to, you can, because you're not going to play everybody. That's where you've got a ranking on that based on wins and losses. But if you've got tie, the NFL doesn't play everybody. They got wins and losses. Right. But if you do have some kind of head-to-head tie on record, then look at your division record. You can go through. We can build a tiebreaker scenario. Head-to-head,
and as long as it's adhered to, and everybody knows what the rules are, that's fine.
Head-to-head, division record, conference record, record against common opponents. I don't like a couple other ones, but if you needed to, what's strength of schedule and then rankings.
Yeah. But now you're adding a human. Now you're adding a human element.
I don't know that you would have to get there. I put them on my list, but I don't know that you would have to necessarily get there. But I think by the time you get through head-to-head, I would actually throw in a coin toss after you went head-to-head, division record, conference record against common opponents. At that point, do a coin toss because that's about as good as people. So
I agree. I agree.
So you end up with four. At that point, you've got 4 divisional champions. There's your 4-team playoff.
Right.
And I'm also a big fan of what you said because it lines up with the portal, the calendar. You can easily do this and have your national championship on New Year's Day at the Rose Bowl. Yeah. And for the nostalgia sake, because what we're going to do is we're going to have all that. You get one off week between the regular season, and then you go play your SEC championship, Big Ten championship, and you could probably fit one more off week because the NFL does it, and they fit it all in there, and the Super Bowl's played when it's played. But you can figure out what that looks like, but you can limit the 3 and 4 weeks off and you got the divisional championships, play the conference championships, roll right into the national championship, be done on January 1st, and that's it. That's your
We'll get to my schedule here in a minute because I've got a national championship happening the week before Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. Again, for the nostalgia piece, January 1st used to be the day where that was.
Yeah, but we've ruined that now with spreading 28 bowl games starting in November.
And I do think there's one more piece that I've heard, and I don't think this would be fun. I've heard several people throw it out there because what do you do with the bowl games? My scenario kills all the bowl games. There's no more alignment, and that's part of the problem we're dealing with right now is you've got these contracts and bowl games, and you got to shoehorn these games into a bowl game because there's some agreement. So I kind of blew all that up. But I do think there's a place that the bowl games could be played, and I think it's really one of 2 places. My preference will be my second one. The one is you could still have them at the end of the year as celebrations like they used to be, that if you didn't make the 14 playoff, you go play a bowl game, and it's fun. The players get to play. There's goodness in it. But I think an even more fun thing, and I heard several people throw this out, is say we're in 2026, you use this year, you would build the matchups based on this year, and then you play the bowl games in the spring. And so that's preseason spring, or you could do it late summer preseason like the NFL does before fall, and use the matchups from this current season for next year. But you could create a couple of week preseason with the 64 teams. You're going to have a lot of games in a handful of days, just like you would. But you could have a fun bowl season for the top, pick the number that matches up, not 40 bowls, but, the handful of ones, the likely suspects that have been around for a long time, and the bowl games could still be there. And they could be fun.
Here's where I think you're going to run into a problem there. If I'm wanting to go into the NIL, into the portal, and let's say the portal's in January, I ain't playing your crazy, silly bowl game.
Well,
I'm already out the door. And if I'm planning on going into the NFL draft, and I've already won my national championship, and now you want me to go play in the Cotton Bowl?
You're not. You're missing.
Why would I do that?
You're missing part of what I was saying, though. The portal's done right after the January 1st national championship.
Right.
So the portal's realigned, which is what they're doing now. I mean, that's right after the national championship. So spring football is your roster for this year. So I'm saying you're playing it with last year's matchups with the next year's team. So if you're going in the draft, you're not going to play.
Oh, okay.
It's basically spring football today. Spring football has been bastardized into Fun Fest days.
Our coach is going to want to run the risk of taking next year's starting tailback and playing him in a game that's for fun before the season begins. I don't know.
They're doing some of it now.
Maybe. I agree with you. I think that would be
what you're going to get to see is you're going to get to see the freshmen play. And I was listening to Mike Brown. Part of where I was thinking about this too is he was talking about spring games. He said when he was coaching, he watched every spring game of every team he was going to play. Mm-hmm. He said, I didn't watch anything schematically. I didn't care what the coaches were doing. I looked for players. Right. And I think it would be an opportunity to build depth because you got other issues with football right now trying to build depth. Is you get some reps in a game time environment in a game that has no bearing on anything for a bunch of freshmen. I don't think Arch Manning is going to play this game. He may play just like you would in preseason NFL. He may play one series. He may play 6 snaps. And then you're going to end up with a bunch of underclassmen in. But it gets them some reps in a game environment that may help later in the season with depth.
Yeah. That are you
anyway,
playing,
the bowl game
playing shorts and sweatshirts and do 7-on-7. But
but
no, I think it would be fun. I think getting the buy-in. I mean, these days, it's always been coaches never in a spring game, even when it was a serious game.
Yeah,
they never give you anything but the plain bread and butter.
It's preseason plays. NFL. The NFL does it today, and they're doing the same thing.
Now they've gotten to the point. And you're right. The NFL does do some inter-team kind of stuff early.
Yeah. Well, you got preseason. There's a preseason, but you have preseason games. I'm saying do the same thing. These are legit preseason games that don't matter.
They just happen in the spring.
They're just doing them in the spring. And again, you could do it later, but and later may be better because you've developed some of those players longer and the ones that are coming in the summer. But spring, summer, preseason, whether it's spring or summer, do the same thing.
Right.
Because I do think it gives some of those young kids, it gives them some live reps that are fun.
Well, I hadn't thought of it in terms of preseason.
And at the end of the day, I'm willing to throw out the bowl games altogether. I don't care. I was trying to be nostalgic and save.
Well, see, I was doing it for those play-in games.
Right.
At least for the major bowls. And then the other bowls, I mean, the Tostitos Bowl.
Yeah, who cares? The Pop-Tarts Bowl, the Duke's
Pop-Tart
Mayonnaise Bowl.
Okay, fine.
Don't care.
They're okay if there are colleges out there that want to play in those. Do that with some recognition.
Here's the question I would ask Randy of what are we trying to solve? Because I think the challenge, when I looked at it and said, okay, what am I trying to solve? I'm trying to take the humans out of it. I tried to go Mike Leach because no matter what's happened with the playoffs, and here's what I would argue too, when we had the Farmer's Almanac national champion and all the different, that was not necessarily getting you your national champion. I would argue though that in the BCS era, in the 14 playoff era, in the 12-team playoff era, you end up with the best team being the national champion. I don't know if you end up with necessarily the best 2, but I would almost argue you end up with the best 2 each year. So it's not really even I think what's funny is we all argue about whether our team got in or some team we like should have got in, didn't get in. Most people don't argue that last year Indiana was probably the best team. And I think you can go back through every year and say that. And so it's like, what are we trying to solve? Well, I think you're trying to make it where and this is where I don't think you need 12 teams to identify the best team because I think the BCS did it pretty well before. I think
if you trusted the computer.
Yeah.
If you trusted the guy that programmed the computer.
Most years, though, everybody would agree that was the best team. It got there. It didn't feel like it.
I would say probably so.
I
Certainly
think the
all
problem,
those years that Alabama won, it was right.
Sure, absolutely. The funny thing, though, I think is the argument that people get so wrapped around the axle in is it was the 5th and 6th team, and now it's the 13th and 14th team.
Right.
I'm a Texas homer. I do think, and this is not from Texas people. It was from a lot of other people, Kirby Smart being one of them after he played Texas. He said nobody wants to play that team in the playoffs because they got hot late in the year. So that's where the argument comes in of if my team gets in, but again, win the games, be the 12th team. I just am not a huge.
Don't wait till the end of the year to get hot.
I
Okay?
agree, and I'm
No,
not a fan. I'm not a fan of expanding the playoffs and going 64 teams. Or I don't think we need more teams.
Right.
I think you need a structured. And again, I was trying to answer the question of what problem are we solving. It's all the ambiguity that goes into building who's in the playoffs. So how do you make that more structured so that they're, again, the Mike Leach, how do you get that to where Division II football has a national champion that they play for and nobody argues about who it is? How do you get it more like that and take the humans out of it?
Yeah, and I tell you, that was one of the two things I was trying to accomplish with mine. Number one is take the humans out, okay? And with the exception of the committee picking some at-large teams and doing some seeding, I think I was doing that. The other thing is don't forget the fan. And so often we forget that these regional rivalries, these close proximities geographically, the historic rivalries that are there, they mean a lot to the fans. There may be people that don't give a flip. There are a lot of people that don't give a flip about the rivalry between Pitt and West Virginia. But if you're a Pitt fan or an alum or a West Virginia fan or alum, or you're from that region, you understand it. Okay. So I wanted to make sure that instead of having the polls, the betting platforms, the heads and administrators of the conferences making these decisions about who gets in, who are the best teams, this sort of thing. Let's create something that the local fans can appreciate and that everyone can understand. Hey, my team went 12-0 this year, and they went undefeated in the conference. Guess what? We're the conference champions. We're in the CFP. So that was the main thing. Also, it was.
I diminish the playoffs a lot. I mean, and that's one of the things Josh Pace talks about a lot is he doesn't care about the playoffs at all. He cares more about the regular season games. That's one of the things I was trying to do is I way diminish the playoffs because you got two games and then you got one game. There's 4 teams, and so I really try to put a lot of emphasis back on because most people I talk to, again, I do respect Pate. Klatt likes the playoffs, thinks it's better. I don't think many people argue that the regular season isn't the most fun part because if your team's not in the playoffs, unless you're a hardcore, crazy college football person like you and I are, a lot of people don't watch it. But they watch a lot of the regular season because it matters so much, and they watch their team in the regular season. And so how do you get more emphasis back on the regular season? Make the regular season be what decides a lot of it.
Well, that's true. Part of me was looking at the revenue generation. So if you've got 4 rounds, 3 leading up to a national championship, there's a lot of money there. And
here's what I would ask though is what I would like, and I don't know the answer to this. And I hear about all that. I don't know that piece is generating all the revenue. And again, we talked about it before with the travel budget. Some of that, it's putting the schools in a bind. Mm-hmm. It's generating TV money wherever that's going now, and without the legitimate revenue model.
Well, and again, we'll talk about that next week because you're right. Right now, I don't know that the universities are getting their fair share.
The ticket sales are not selling out. I mean, I've been to those games. When you play back-to-back games, the stadiums are not sold out.
Right.
People are not doing it. So it seems good in theory that more games means more revenue. I also agree with Josh Pate. Revenue should not – that's a point of diminishing return. When you suck the life out of your fans by trying to get more revenue, at some point that model diminishes. How do you make the regular season be –
you don't think we need 15 games or 16 games to get to a national champion?
I don't think so. I think the NFL does.
Although if you
could put a wild card, if you wanted to do that, put a wild card round in, do something like the NFL, add another level of getting in, because shockingly, a lot of wild card teams have gone to the Super Bowl and won. So you could do to make mine, and you've got enough time with mine to do it too. You could add a wild card weekend in there, and get another set of playoffs and add buys, and you wouldn't extend the season a lot.
Well, let me tell you just real quick. We can kind of wrap this up. The schedule is also important, and we've already touched on that a little bit. And I went back and I took a look and I did some research on when colleges are hitting the campuses? When do they start school in the fall, et cetera? Get rid of this week 0, which is stupid.
Yeah.
Whoever came up with that is an idiot, but they're marketing people.
Either make it week 1 or do away with it.
Start the college football season in the 3rd week of August.
Yeah.
Virtually every college campus in the country, that is when their students are they have either started or they are about to start the fall semester. Okay. If you started in the 3rd week of August, each team played a 12-game season. Each team had 1 bye during the course of the season. That means you'd have 13 weeks of regular season football across every conference. Play-in games, if you followed my model, would take up week 14. Then, and the conference regular season champion would get a bye there. So that's an advantage. The first round of the CFP under my model would be week 15, the second round, week 16, the third round, week 17, and the national championship would be in week 18. And if you look on a calendar, you would be finished. You would have your national championship the weekend prior to Christmas.
Yeah.
And now everybody gets to take their Christmas break. You're not holding your kids over. Transfer portal would start the week after the national championship,
Yep.
which I know would throw it around Christmas, but fine. Or if you want to wait till January 1, you could do that. But I know that a lot of these guys want to get their transfer portal situation taken care of and being able to start in the spring semester, which usually is around the beginning of the 2nd week of January. So if you're going to have a 2-week portal, have enough time for the portal to work and these guys to get on campus. So that was sort of the challenge of the calendar. We've got to quit having 2 byes.
Yeah.
We've got to quit having some teams playing in Ireland in week 0 and everybody else starts a week or 2 or 3 weeks later, that sort of thing, because that's what's pushing us so far into the year.
Yeah, I think I'm close to
now.
Under
your model, I think you'd get there as well because I have obviously added at least 2 extra games.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I was going to address that I don't love right now that's happening, and it's part of what I did intentionally. And again, I would be in favor of probably putting a wild card type thing in there, and I do think the 2 bye weeks are important. And I think what's happening, especially with high school kids going into college, you're seeing a ton of injuries late in the season, especially when you take out the play my model and you're not playing these FCS schools. You're going to have a lot of kids that are getting hurt late in the season if you don't spread this. I think start week 0 is the week after you're talking about, I think, but start the college football season then. Just make week 0 week 1, somewhere, 3rd, 4th week of August, whatever that is. You could do 2 byes, but you don't have to have if you don't have all these rounds too, that's one of the things that I think is when we start getting to 17 and 18 games, you look at some of these teams late in the season, the injuries they have with key players. Are you really getting the best? Is it good for the players, first of all, because you're running them to the ground, especially at their age? It's different when you're talking about late 20s kids who all they do all day, every day, which Carson Beck said Miami pretty much doesn't go to class. There's a whole discussion about what schools go to class now and what don't. But in the NFL, that is their job. That's all they do is take care of their body all day, every day, and they got the best of the best to do it. And they're more mature. They're not growing the same rate and things. So playing those longer seasons is probably easier. But I think that's something that's got to be looked at. Again, I think you and I both agree something different is better. It's really, do we want to look at it going backwards? Do we want to look at it going more toward an NFL model? And I think all of this is going to take, and we've come back to this. We talked about it last week. Is who's going to do this? And I've got an interesting thing that I heard. I thought about this, and then I actually heard somebody talking about it. And I think it might have been Pate. Is who, and I know Pate's kid's about being the commissioner. I don't think that's his best role. I think his best role is doing what he's doing. I don't think it's Nick Saban. I think it's actually Greg Sankey. And it's funny because Greg Sankey is arguing for a lot of things that are pro SEC, which is what he should do right now. That's what his job is, which may not be great for college football. It's great for the SEC. But I would make an argument, and you could probably, the Big Ten may argue that Tom Thibodeau's done the same thing, but I don't agree. because they've had a few years of dominance at the top. The SEC has had many, many, many years of dominance, top to bottom, producing champions, and it's been a run like no conference has ever had. What Greg Sankey has done for the SEC, if you elevate him to do what he's done for the SEC for college football, and he, love him or hate him, most people do respect him and what he's done. I think you got to look at his job and say, if he can accomplish it at a conference level, is he the kind of guy you want to put to fix all this stuff? Because somebody ultimately is going to have to take over the NCAA. It also gets back into what we talked about last week with the SCORE Act. You've got to have some antitrust legislation. There's going to have to be some subsidy for the FCS. All that's going to have to get unwound to get here. Frankly, I'd probably be okay with your model, my model, anything that takes more humans and voting and opinions, because the real thing that became evident this year, and the more you get to see who's doing what, I don't remember what her name was, but there was the girl that's a USC reporter that basically admitted she doesn't watch football.
Oh, yeah.
I forget who lost, and they moved up. Her poll was an absolute train wreck. And her point was, well, it doesn't matter. There's other people voting. Well, a lot of them are doing that, unfortunately. And
Right.
and those do have, because the problem is until the CFP rankings actually come out, the AP and the coaches poll are the rankings, and I still think
Right.
those bias the CFP, because shockingly they look a lot like the first one. So you got
Yes.
people who aren't even watching games that are beat reporters that are voting. So I'm just a fan of, I'm a Mike Leach fan. Get the opinions. It's not figure skating. It's not gymnastics. You can determine this on the field with a score, and I like more of that. So
Yeah. No, if your model, you can take any model that's out there that takes that human element out and settles it on the field.
Yep.
I could get behind.
Yeah.
Now, pulling it off might be a little more difficult. I don't know. I do like the fact that your model follows, or probably leads into the NFL model much more closely. And ultimately, the NFL is going to, if they want to, they're going to dictate what the NC2A is going to do, and they probably should.
Well, I think there needs to be alignment, and we talked about it last week, and there's been discussions around that. The commissioner said he's open to having those discussions. He's basically getting free player development right now.
Right.
And I think at some point, if Greg Sankey became the guy or whoever that runs college football, they need to sit down and have a discussion. And I think as soon as you do that, this becomes a lot easier, because then you can start mimicking what the NFL does. But I think you've got Roger Goodell, love him or hate him, he makes a lot of money, but the NFL is still really popular and it works well.
Right.
So
no, he's done an extraordinary job, a very difficult job. It doesn't mean I have to agree with everything that he does, but
the results are there, though.
They are. So, I think one of the things that, like I said, I know that we're basically just talking about taking two different paths to trying to at least accomplish the same thing. But as I was doing this, I got to thinking, maybe we can have one more session on college sports. Then we'll have solved all of that. We've already solved most of the world's politics.
We may have to circle back on some of that. I don't know if you've been tracking, but that's not all on perfect footing.
No, there are some new things that have cropped up that, yes, I think need
I
to
like
be
our break
addressed.
from geopolitical solutions that we put out there, but unfortunately, none of them listen to our podcast, and they're not cooperating.
That's right.
So I think we're going to have to circle back to maybe the Strait of Hormuz at some point. But I think there's more to be talked about.
What I'd like to take a look at next week is how can we arrive at an equitable sharing of revenue for college sports? Not equal, okay, there's a difference, but an equitable sharing of revenue. And there are a number of proposals that are out there that are being tossed around. Right now, it's the Wild West.
Yeah.
And, as we've talked, they can leave things just like they have right now, like they are right now. And Texas Tech will continue to outspend everyone, at least for several years. But there is a smarter way to do it. And there are a couple. And so I'd like for us to give some thought to what's out there, what's being recommended, what is, how should that revenue that is generated within each school or within each conference, how should it be used?
And I think nobody can argue that the money is what's producing the results. If you look at the national champions in football, the SEC was dominating. their TV contract was bigger than anybody's.
Right.
The Big Ten renegotiated their TV contract. It became the biggest one, and now shockingly, they're winning the national championship. So
Right.
if you follow the money at a conference level, the conference producing the national champions has been, almost without exception, the conference who is making the most money from TV.
Well, and even within the conferences that can't compete at that level, the Big 12 cannot compete with the SEC and the Big 10 in terms of TV revenue. But if you've got a guy that's willing to sign off on 40, 50 million a year to get players, what ends up happening is you get this tremendous separation that is occurring in the Big 12 right now. I realize this next year Tech might go 1-11, but I doubt it.
Doesn't look like
I think 12-0 is a possibility. 11-1 is probably quite probable. And the reason is they're just outspending. That is not sustainable. That will kill me. Well, as long as it's Texas Tech winning, I probably will be okay. You'll probably be okay as long as the
I want a couple of years out of it, and then I would like some parity. But the same thing happened in basketball. So a friend of mine, we were working out the other morning, and he's a Michigan guy, so he's pretty happy. But he was going through both the men's and women's, the money that the conference has paid out to each of their teams. It's very shocking that it follows the conferences who had all the players at the end. You know, what the Big Ten did, what the SEC did, what that all looked like. It looks a lot like how the final team standing were. So, I think next week's we've talked about a lot of the how, and I think there's 15 different versions of the how that would be better than where we are today. We're stuck in the middle of purgatory right now. I think the biggest piece that's got to get worked out, though, to get to a NFL, the parity in the NFL is unbelievable. Take out the Patriots and what they did, and the Cleveland Browns shouldn't suck as long as they have. But you look at everything else, the NFL has done a phenomenal job of parity, of making it where you don't have the same team winning every year, and it's through design.
Every game every Sunday means something.
The spreads in the NFL, you don't see, it's a rare exception that teams get blown out.
Right.
And so the draft process, everything else, and I think that's where next week will be fun, because the money, shockingly, business, sports, everything, money matters a lot. And I think fixing that piece of it, because the problem is you can do all these other things and you can build a framework that we've talked about with the conferences, with the CFP, and the money is going to still run all that. So you're not going to end up with more parity. You can probably have less arguments, but then you're going to end up with, it's going to be the Clemson, Alabama times. You're going to have 4 teams that are playing in these same games every year. And then ultimately you are going to kill the sport because people aren't going to watch that every year.
Right. So. No, and it is money that's driving it. It's like it or not, it is. It's not tradition that's driving it. It's money that ultimately is driving it. And so how can we make as much money for these schools and the entire industry as possible, while at the same time doing it and distributing it in a manner that is equitable? The NFL they're the model.
Yeah.
Major League Baseball is not.
Yeah.
No.
I agree.
So anyway, I think that'll be a fun one. So give some thought to that. Put your financial hat on, Mr. CEO.
All right, we'll do it. Another good week. Enjoyed it.
Okay, me too. Hey, you have a good one. We'll talk to you next week.
All righty, sounds good.